This is the Freeheel Life podcast number 15. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we're back this week with an awesome episode, and I can't wait to get this thing going today. So, quick newsroom items. I did try to search for some various events around the world. I think we need a better funnel to find all these random ones because you guys are coming up with some cool little festivals. But first off, hopefully everyone had a fantastic 6th annual World Telemark Day this past weekend, and you guys are stoked to start thinking about next year and how you can kind of improve that in your areas and your little gatherings. Two Swiss events that I came across. You've got the 21st of March, and it looks like this is probably the 5th annual. I don't know. My French is a little rusty. Rassemblement de Telemark de Bruxelles. So in Bruxelles, I think, which is part of Verbier, Switzerland, 21st of March, you've got an event going on. And then later on in Switzerland in Schiltorn, May 1 through 5, you have the Telemark only event, which is a really cool one where you have to be a Telemark skier in order to attend. So I've been to that particular one, and it's super fun. Might try to get Paul Fluke on here to talk a little bit about that event sooner than later, so you guys kind of can learn more about it. So today's guest is one of the owners of one of the most important brands in telemark today. In my opinion, he, along with his partner Collins Pringle, has helped shape the telemark binding design of the future. They build some of the most durable bindings to date and carry on a tradition of innovation that was passed on to them by the one and only Russell Rainey many years ago. So please welcome Chris Valiante of 22 Designs. What's up, brother?
What's up, Josh? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, stoked to have you. I think you're actually the first manufacturer that I've managed to wrangle. Managed to wrangle to get on here, so I can't think of a better way to kick it off. So
awesome, psyched to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good. I kind of wanted to start this thing off, and this is probably for people out there, but also myself, is kind of, I was trying to brush up. We actually wrote an article on Telemark Skier about you guys a little while ago, so I was trying to read up and see if I could figure out if I knew some of the background before we talked. But
sure.
I was kind of curious if maybe you could just dive into a little bit about kind of where you grew up and where you started skiing and all that.
Yeah, so just take it all the way back. I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up there. My dad was, folks were skiers, so would take trips to go skiing every year, usually out west and stuff. And then, so started, alpining pretty young, I guess. And then when I was 10, the family picked up and moved to Jackson, Wyoming. And so that was a big change, but obviously a sweet place to move to, and a great place to grow up skiing. So I was lucky enough to be skiing Jackson Hole and Snow King and through elementary school, middle school and stuff.
I think.
And
yeah, did you so were you skiing like snowshoe like as a kid?
Oh, Snow King is the out east. No, growing up it was mostly just like kind of once a year kind of trip out west or up to New England or something. Huh. I don't think I ever skied snowshoe or Wisp or any of those places that were actually that close to DC.
Oh, that's fun.
But yeah. So, I don't think I was probably a very good skier until we moved out here,
Were your parents like ski bums, or like what made them move from DC to Jackson? I mean, that's like a pretty dramatic change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was kind of just like my dad had chance to like take a little time off work, actually the plan was to move out to Jackson for a year, which, a lot of people have that plan and, and never leave. Yeah, exactly. So, and just from taking those trips over the years, they had been to Jackson a couple times and kind of, picked Jackson based on that. And, it's cool place to move to. Obviously it was, kind of pretty different back then,
Was that 80s, you guys?
89. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
When we moved out. So yeah.
That must have been way different. I remember I lived in Eagle, Colorado in 1989, and kind of same thing. Like I didn't even really ski. I think I'd been once living in Denver, and then we moved up to Eagle, but it was like probably like Jackson was back then. I mean, it was kind of like cowboys, and I mean, I remember thinking
definitely that Western vibe.
For sure. Yeah. I remember being like, okay, everyone at school, this is like middle school. I was like, you're either like, a cowboy or you're like a skater. like the only way to be different was like the skater kids kind of had this like, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think Jackson's probably a lot. Yeah. You've probably seen some major change with that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of cowboys around and, of course I've moved over to Driggs, to Teton Valley, 14 years ago now, but not to get ahead of myself here, but yeah, so grew up skiing over there, and let's see, high school and all that. I was a proud Jackson Hole Bronc, and
nice.
then went off to college, back in northern New York, way up like 45 minutes from Canada on the northern edge of the Adirondacks, to Clarkson University in a little town called Potsdam. And that's where I met Collins, actually, pretty much right off the bat, freshman year. And we ended up being roommates the next couple of years. And we were both pretty involved in the outing club, and that's where we both learned to telly. The outing club had a fleet of telly gear. It was like, that era of, I'm doing air quotes here, telemark skis, but
was this was like mid 90s that you both were up there?
No, this was so I graduated high school in 98 and headed out there, so kind of that 98 through 02 at college.
I was reading that article I was telling you about, and tell me if this is true. So this is like fact or fiction. It said that you guys started you and Colin started telemark skiing to prepare for Y2K.
Yeah, I think Collins threw that in there as a little bit of comedy, but yeah,
I don't
think there's
younger people are going to be like, what are you guys talking about? Y2K. Just in case you're too young to remember, we all thought like clocks and things were going to fall apart, and like the world was going to devolve into a mess.
Digitally end.
Yeah, which is funny because we weren't even that digital in 2000 if you think about it.
Right.
We didn't even have cell phones, most of us. That's funny.
The computers only had 2 digits or something, so 99, and it was just going to turn to 0.
Oh man, that's so funny to think about. That's cold as hell up there too, because it's like what's the local ski hill up there?
Well, there isn't one, and that's the thing is we kind of the places that we started telling were like in their Adirondacks itself, kind of backcountry. There's a mountain called Mount Azure that was about 45 minutes away, and that's kind of where we did most of our early turn earning. There was a couple of little like former ski hills one was owned by Clarkson, one was owned by St. Lawrence, that were no kind of lifts or anything, but you could hike up and get a few turns. And then we would also go to Mount Titus was probably the closest ski area. And I don't even remember. I think that was about an hour and a half away, maybe a little less.
You guys isn't Clarkson pretty close to Fort Drum? Is that up that way?
Yeah, it's Clarkson's like east of that.
Yeah.
And a little north. Fort Drum's by like Watertown. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Watertown. Shout out to 10th Mountain Division. That's why I know it's super cold up there, because I remember driving up there in the winter one time, and I started seeing all these 10th Mountain symbols, which, from when you're from the West Coast, you're always thinking like the Leadville history. And I remember getting up there and I'm like, oh, this is why they stick these dudes up here, because it's literally freezing, humid, cold, and ice. And
totally. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that they're based there now instead of Colorado. There's not, especially where they are, there's not much in the way of mountains. They do get a lot of lake effect snow, and I think there's a little mountain over there called Tug Hill that just gets dumped on, but it's a pretty small, not a lot of root. Yeah.
That's got to be brutal.
Yeah. But we just, we would just ski on, and we would even like build little jumps on campus and stuff behind our dorms. Clarkson was on a hill, and try to throw telly-hellies off of our little kicker and fail miserably. And
hell yeah, telly-hellies. I love it.
But yeah, it was like, that was that era of like telemark skis that were made for telly, but it was after when you learned on the skinny stuff.
Yeah. More like that K2 stuff kind of came into vogue.
Yeah. We had some of the Rossis. I don't even remember what the models were, and some Tuas as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Good stuff. And yeah.
So were you guys both engineers back then, or like in school?
Yeah. And Clarkson is kind of mainly an engineering school, and we were both mechanical, majoring in mechanical engineering all the way through. So, end up, being a decent major for designing telly bindings.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
I feel like every telly binding person has been some engineer of some sort. I guess you have to be, really.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a cool problem to try to solve. There's a little more going on than it's like an alpine binding where nothing's really moving.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when you moved to Jackson, and then you go East Coast for school, had you already met Russell Rainey when you were living in Jackson as a kid?
No, I don't think so. My mom knew him. But I had not met him I did not meet him until after college.
So you were already done with school when you, so basically you ended up going back to do like an internship with him, correct?
Yep. And so I got home from college, and was working construction, and that's kind of what I had done. Summers through college, just it's good summer job in Jackson, and did construction for like 1 year, about a whole year after college, and then I got connected with Russell through my mom actually, and he was looking for an intern basically to redesign the climber on the HammerHead, which he had come out with like a year before. And I don't know if you remember that original kind of square build climber on the HammerHead, but
I don't know if I've seen that. Was it just a single climbing post? It was probably kind of a riff off the Super Loop one. Maybe. Yeah. A little bigger. I mean, the block was kind of the big blue thing. And the bail was more square, but, and it was, kind of like those ones that are supposed to like snap into place when they go up or down. Right.
And, Russell was the first one to say it sucked, and it was kind of it was kind of an afterthought because he was busy initially designing and producing, the front part of the binding.
Yeah.
And then so we realized after a year that he needed a better climbing bale, but he had other stuff going on. So he hired me as an intern over that summer of 2003.
Got it. And just so people know too, like if you weren't around Telemark back in the 90s, kind of into this phase that we're talking about, Russell Rainey was the inventor of the Superloop Telemark binding, and which was a pretty influential binding kind of through the 90s. So that's just some quick background.
There was like 3 distinct Superloops, really.
I know. I'm still waiting for the Superloop 1. I can't find it.
The rubber band.
The rubber band surgical tubing heel.
Surgical tubing. We might have one later on somewhere for your museum.
Oh man, I know. When you told me that was, I thought Superloop 2. I was like, oh, this is the first one, and you're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And yeah, that's funny. So
yeah.
So you go work. Yeah, you get the introduction through your mom. You go to create this HammerHeel thing, and I guess what was that? Your first foray into engineering?
Really, yeah. Since school, we'd done some projects, design stuff senior year, but this was the first, my first job that wasn't like construction or something, and just kind of got thrown into it. He showed me how to use. Let's see, I guess the software we were using was Mastercam to design it, and showed me around his little machine shop in the back of his garage. He had a CNC milling machine and a lathe and some other things that we actually now own. We purchased from him since, but yeah, just kind of, it was pretty cool. He just kind of showed me how he did stuff, how he works on designs, and then said, okay, we just need to make a better climbing bale. And, came up with a few different ideas, and he helped me narrow it down, and ended up kind of settling on the HammerHeel, the spring-loaded climbing bale, which ended up, being kind of a decent design. So
I was gonna say, I've always wondered how the hell did you come up with like an offset? So like for people that have never seen a HammerHeel, it's basically a 2-part system. So there's the top heel part, the heel plate, and then there's a thing called a heel key, and then the wire goes inside. But somehow, and explain this, these guys offset the key part that pushes in, and only when you mount it to the ski does it cams the metal part into place, which makes it snap. So there's no spring, but the camming of the 2 plastic pieces going together creates that. And I've always wondered, every time, I mean, honestly, when I first had to learn how to mount those on skis, I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, I can't even hold this thing into place.
Oh yeah. We definitely that was a lot of source of a lot of phone calls over the years.
Oh, I'm sure.
Which we've finally kind of addressed with the new double one, where we just screwed it together ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. No, I felt like that was like a rite of passage for the ski techs here.
Totally.
You're like, so this is like its own thing.
This doesn't work. With the phone call we would get, it's like, no, you have to screw it to the ski.
That's so funny.
Try not to strip out the ski.
How did you come up with offsetting the little key part?
Yeah. I guess just kind of experimenting. I think I must have inspired by some other similar, flippy bale, like the I remember it was like when you pick up the lid of an MSR pot has something similar. Used to have something similar like that, or kind of a wire gate carabiner.
Because it does kind of. Oh, that's funny. I never thought about that, because they are kind of. They're not straight across from each other.
Yeah, it does work differently than a wire gate carabiner, but the way it works is like the two arms are offset at different angles and in space, kind of front to back, and because of that, I mean, you can see when it's mounted that the bale is kind of like cocked over to one angle, and that's also the reason why it's the rounded bale. I think that was Russell's idea, because rather than trying to like match up this squarish bale and have it look all cattywampus, it's just simpler to have it be rounded. But yeah, it took quite a bit of experimenting with different angles and offset distances and stuff to kind of figure that out, and a lot of patience. And I don't know if I could if I would have had the patience or whatever to come up with it now, like it took some focus, and but anyways, yeah, I was psyched that it worked out, and we came and he showed me how to make inserts for the injection mold too, and that was the last part of the project, was making the injection mold on the CNC milling machine
for the plastic then for
the two plastic parts. Yeah.
Oh, so you guys were actually making those in Wilson? It was in Wilson, wasn't it?
Well, no, this was in Wilson. He lived in this subdivision called Indian Paintbrush, which is like almost 1,000 feet off the valley floor. It's kind of cool. An interesting side note that in this same subdivision were a couple other guys. Let's see, Peter Carmen and Rick Liu, who, among other things, developed the glue for Ascension climbing skins, and
oh wow,
Peter invented super gaiters and some other things, and it was kind of a little outdoor industrial subdivision.
And these are guys just like making stuff out of their house, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But selling them elsewhere or whatever. But yeah, we made the injection mold and then shipped. We didn't, actually shoot the parts there. We shipped it down to AIM Processing in Longmont, Colorado, which is still where we get all of our plastic parts made today. Luckily, and then we actually, it was funny because we got, it worked when I had milled out the prototype parts out of like nylon or whatever. It worked fine, and then we got the first sample parts back and put the bale in there and screwed it down, and it didn't really work. And I was freaking out for a minute, and Russell was like, "Nope, just put a little silicone on there." And so we put a little silicone lube on there, and then it snapped right up and down. And to this day, we still have to, put a little lube on all of the bales for them to work.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, what was it like working with Russell back then? I've never actually met him, but I always kind of wonder, like, I think I've always been kind of interested in when you really start kind of looking at those old super loops, and then obviously the HammerHead. I always think, man, that guy was like super ahead of his time in terms of like coming up with like adjustable pivot points and how he would utilize the springs. Some of the
stainless steel stuff was, I think he was on the leading edge of. And,
like with the toe pieces, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
and it was interesting because he, you could kind of see the evolution of his designs and the lesson. We always talk about how the HammerHead was sort of, you could see all the lessons that he learned from the super loop in terms of like the big 6-hole mounting pattern and a big old spring out front with plenty of spring travel. Because in the super loop days, it was a little bit of an arms race between the bindings and the boots, because the boots kept getting bigger and stiffer, and then the bindings would break or pull out or whatever. And it was a
super loop
challenge.
Yeah, like Super Loop 2 and 3, I mean, those springs were pretty small,
Yeah. And ironically, just by chance, before I had even met Russell, both Collins and I, after we graduated, we had to buy our own skis, and I bought a pair at the ski swap, and I think he got a pair at a yard sale. of tele skis, and they both had super loops on them. That was, it was just a pretty popular binding at that point. And we both broke them. Collins had an earlier toe piece that broke, and I pulled mine out of my ski, and so we were, he had already placed an order with Russell at that point for parts or something. But anyways, that's the next step is I finished that project, and that, it was like, I don't know, August, September. I guess it was probably even before I had totally finished it, but he told me he wanted to get out of the business. And,
like right after you got done with the hammer, he's like, all right, kid, you'll do.
Yeah. Well, he didn't just say like, hey, you should have this. He was like, I'm kind of, shopping it around to, maybe Black Diamond and whoever else.
Oh, interesting.
The HammerHead, essentially.
Yeah.
And this was, trying to remember if it had been, I think he had sold it for 2 years at that point.
Because this is
a beta.
I think beta was 99. That's what Dosty was saying. Beta's 99, 2000 it came out or something.
Okay. Yep. So he'd sold it for 2 years, and then this was going to be the third year with the upgraded heel in 2003. And so he was like, yeah, I'm going to sell the business, and kind of shopping it around. And I thought about it for, I don't know, a day or two, and said, well, what if I try to take it over, and I could have, call Drew's roommate to come out and help out.
Wow.
Collins was living in New York at that point. Yeah. And he said, okay, well, make me I don't remember exactly. We had to figure out how we were going to buy it and everything. And he actually ended up helping us finance it. And we were able to, pay off part of it over the next few years with his help. So that was pretty cool. But the funny thing is Collins and I and another college buddy had been planning this trip to Argentina, and we already had plane tickets and everything in November and December. And, if we'd been a little more business minded, we probably would have canceled that trip to save some money and figure out how exactly we were going to buy the HammerHead from Russell. But so we were down there in these like dial up internet cafes, waiting for an email to download to like haggle out the details with Russell.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
So that was pretty wild.
And that was like in November. So that was like right before the winter, or that's like right.
Yeah.
That's like so wait, was he shipping the bindings
he was starting,
that year?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, okay.
He was shipping, and
you guys, meanwhile, you guys are in South America, like partying it up, like, yeah, totally. We'll be back at some point.
Yeah, dude. We just spent all our money on these plane tickets, but we'll figure something out.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So made it back and figured out a way to make it work with the bank and with Russell, and ended up taking over. We kind of announced it at the OR show that year, at the very beginning of February. And so that's kind of, just celebrated our 16th anniversary.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, made it work.
So basically you got the HammerHead from him. And I guess here's a random question. When did you switch it from blue to black?
I think it was 2 years. I mean, that first year, was just, we kind of finished up February, March. We didn't even really have a location. We were working out of kind of this little cabin that Collins was living in, and I was living on the other side of the valley. But yeah, then, so I want to say there was 2 full years of blue where we did change the shim to say 22 designs at the front of it. and then we switched to the black
and made it a little more rectangular, I might note.
Yeah, when we put that 22 designs on there.
As a fine connoisseur of hammerheads.
Yes, absolutely. We still see them out there. I mean,
I know. I still see the Rainey ones. I didn't even. That's where I really realized. Like, I was like, oh, Rainey had like this kind of oval shim, and then you guys like switched it to the. There was like a blue 22, and then the black one. So, did 22 designs come out of like right in February when you guys announced that you were taking over the company? Did you guys make that the 22 designs name at that point?
Yeah, I mean, we had, I don't know what we thought of that over that winter, naming it after Highway 22, which goes over Teton Pass, Wyoming Highway 22, kind of our favorite place to ski then, and still ski up there a fair bit. It's a little more crowded up there these days.
A little bit, yeah, I was gonna say a little bit busier than back then.
Yeah, but it was funny. I remember that first OR show, Russell was kind of introducing us to some folks, and we were just kind of wide-eyed and to the whole industry and everything, and riding around in the back of Mitch's minivan with Mitch and Russell, Mitch being Mitch Weber of Telemark Tips.
Yep.
And who was, a big, he was like the Telemark media at that point.
He was
along with the magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, he was was this down in Vegas?
No, this was in Salt Lake.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm thinking SIA was probably back in Vegas that area.
Right. That's right. We'd always been on kind of the OR side. And
you didn't miss much debauchery down in Vegas. So.
Yeah, we should have been going to that one.
Yeah.
But riding around in the back of Mitch's minivan, listening to the latest Eminem album with Mitch and Russell was one of my favorite memories of that year.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I was gonna say, like, what? So, like, with him passing on.
Yeah.
Like with Russell kind of passing it on, do you feel like, were there any like words of advice from him or anything that I'm just kind of like, one of these days I got to talk to him because I'm just so fascinated by
for sure
that era, but I'm kind of curious, like obviously some design elements have kind of continued, from, I just feel like the HammerHead, like for him to come up with a bunch of that stuff, stiffy springs, the 5 positions, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did he pass some of that along to you guys in terms of like, hey, these are some good ideas, or even like business advice?
Yeah.
Like, was he like,
sure.
He's like, I don't know, please buy my company, but I'm not totally sure this is a great idea. Or
I mean, yeah, I think I remember him saying like, if you're lucky, the HammerHead will last 10 years, Oh,
wow.
And I think he was pretty accurate on that. And it could have, we could have even kept selling it longer probably, but he gave us different kinds of advice, whether it was on the design stuff and some of those things that he had learned about the big mounting pattern and spring travel and, stainless steel toe piece as opposed to aluminum, which can have fatigue problems, and trying to think of what some of those things were in particular, but the having that big long spring travel was kind of the key. It's like you gotta just have enough spring travel that it's not going to bottom out, because when it bottoms out, something's going to go.
Yeah, the energy's got to go somewhere else.
Right. And the business side was interesting. He had sold the Superloop, was the top selling binding for several years. And he had quite a, I think, shop going in his garage with he'd have a bunch of ski instructors and Exum guides putting Superloops together over the summer and fall. And then when he came out with the HammerHead, it was really interesting because here was this new binding. People kind of knew about it a little bit from the beta test, and it looked pretty different and exciting. And I think there was a little bit of hype around it, and his retailers were excited. He had a distributor in the States that sold to all the retailers, and they had placed a bunch of preseason orders in 2000 or whatever it was. And I believe it was in August, he decided that he didn't want to sell to retailers, and he wanted to just sell smaller quantities direct.
Really?
Yeah.
In 2000, he was already thinking that way?
Yeah, well, it was right when the HammerHead came out.
Wow.
But yeah, definitely ahead of his time in terms of the direct to consumer. I mean, he had a website, but people didn't buy much online in those days.
Yeah, it was like mail orders still. You probably sent a postcard in, please send me a binding. Here's a check.
yeah, totally. Well, he was trying to do it on the website, and he did. He did. But I mean, that you can imagine with all these retailers that had their orders, and then in August he makes that decision. There was a lot of retailers that were not happy about that.
Wow.
And so that was kind of what we were dealing with. He was selling smaller quantities for those first 2 years because he was selling direct, and he was selling to a few retailers with kind of strict terms. They had to buy, a big chunk of bindings and prepay for them. So that was kind of, when we took over, that was kind of our business plan, is okay, we're going to get this back to a wholesale model where we sell to more retailers and, distributors and that sort of thing. And that did work out, but it was definitely challenging those first couple of years. I mean, there was a lot of retailers that wouldn't talk to us, and we kind of had to be like, all right, we're different. We're a different company now.
Yeah. Just rebuilding the relationships and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So he was a little ahead of his time there, but obviously we had a great design to work with in the HammerHead. And so that was pretty crucial. And we could see that it was a good design. And so we were psyched to try to spread that out into the world. And, and then in subsequent years, start working on new designs and things.
Yeah. And I mean, so I guess kind of fast forward. So you had, what year did, Vice was the next one, right? Or did you do Axle first?
Well, there was the Bombshell, which wasn't,
Bombshell,
a new design, but kind of smaller with the different colors and stuff. And it was kind of important because the HammerHead was just one size, so it didn't really work that well with small boots.
Yeah.
But then Axle was after that. I'm not even going to try to pick a year, but a few, a few years after that. And we had been working on, it was one of those things within a year or two after we bought the HammerHead, we knew that the next goal was a free pivot binding. I don't remember when, the G3 Targa Ascent and the 01 came out around the same time. And,
it was probably 06, 07, somewhere in there. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And we kind of, we had been working on that problem when they came out, but we just hadn't really cracked that nut yet because, initially we were kind of, the designs we were working on were a little more HammerHead looking. And obviously we had to completely, come up with something new.
Reverse where your spring was. And
yeah,
the axle. Different.
Yeah, didn't share much with the HammerHead, really just the heel tube and throw, that kind of very rear part of it there. But finally came out with did a beta test. Kind of liked Russell's idea of doing that with the HammerHead, did a beta test for the axle, and then came out with the axle. And the axle's been a successful binding for us over the years, and came out with the Vice a couple years after that, which replaced the HammerHead. And you still get some people saying, well, I like my HammerHeads. I don't know, I want to try that Vice binding.
Yeah. So from that point, you guys obviously created the Outlaw and then the Outlaw X, and kind of started getting into the NTN thing. And obviously there's kind of these two, camps, if you will, between sort of, like the 75 camp and the NTN camp. But as a binding manufacturer, kind of like, what do you guys kind of see moving forward in terms of the NTN stuff?
Yeah. I mean, we're, it's funny because going back when we started, we obviously had 75 binding. And so we were sort of like biased towards that. And who were these Rotofella guys coming out with this new weird stuff? And, we'd heard some things that wasn't so great. And so we'd stuck with 75 for a while, but then we kind of started to realize, like, oh, this NTN thing gives you some opportunity for a step-in binding, a more reliable release. And, we started to make prototypes and ski on it and realize that you had better edge control too. Like it's easier to carve on NTN stuff. And so, started working on some NTN stuff and eventually came out with the Outlaw and modified that a little bit a couple years later to the Outlaw X, kind of simplified it. And that's been a huge binding for us. It's our top seller now. And
Outlaw X's.
Yeah. And so yeah, we do feel like NTN is really the future of tele, and there's 75 is going to be around for a while, I think. I think eventually it might be sort of for that lighter weight kind of backyard type of stuff.
Yeah, like almost like going back to like 3-pin, kind of that.
Yeah.
Walking in the woods, kind of you're not using like an NNN kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because those 3-pin bindings are always just going to be so cheap and simple, and it is a nice simple system for that type of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and with the NTN stuff, I mean, we were talking about Vice, and have you guys ever thought about with now that you're kind of in the NTN world, does it make sense ever thinking about like more of a resort oriented, Outlaw X or something along those lines that has the features but not the tour mode?
Yeah, I think that's something we're thinking about, and we want to do it right and have something that improves the brake system, maybe more of a retractable brake kind of thing. But it makes sense to have something that's a lower price point, simpler binding for people, especially who are like getting into tele on the coming from Alpine and the resort world. But yeah, we're pretty gung ho on NTN these days. Our demo fleet is all NTN now, and we feel like that's the future of downhill telemark turns for sure.
Yeah, it almost seems like to me, like when I'm trying to explain it to people, it's not that it's strange that we have 75 versus NTN, where I think we've probably talked about this before, but it's almost like we should get to a point where we're back to calling things telemark bindings, and it's like, hey, this is how you fasten your boot to the ski, people. Like, it's not like,
right.
You have to choose, and there's like this huge dilemma between which is better. And
sure.
So hopefully,
NTN's not that new anymore.
Well, I know, isn't that funny? I mean, it's like we're like nearing the 15-year mark almost, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of crazy, but
yeah.
And I mean, you kind of hit on it too. It's, I mean, a lot of people, and I've said this in some previous podcasts, it's like, I think the resorts are an amazing place for telemark to grow in the future too. Do you guys kind of see that as well, like from the binding perspective?
Yeah, I mean, people think about Telly as being such a backcountry thing because that was how people, accessed the backcountry back in the starting in the 70s, but certainly in the 80s and even 90s. And, it was light gear. It was kind of made more sense in the backcountry. But now that we're on alpine skis and we got, big burly bindings and plastic boots, it's kind of, obviously you can ski anything you want in it. And, the resort world is just where there's more room for us to grow because that's where most of the skiers are. Even though, backcountry skiing has exploded in the last 10 years. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but there's still a lot more people who ski the resorts,
Yeah, for sure. So, I would say it's a little bit easier to learn a Telly turn in a resort where you can do reps and not hike up somewhere and then face plant your entire way down. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, is there I guess the only other thing I had, like we were talking about the bindings and the boots, backcountry resort. I mean, from obviously you guys probably deal with boot companies and stuff like that. I mean, are there any things, as we're kind of getting into some of these newer bindings and tech toe and all that? I mean, I hear a lot of stuff here, but like, do you guys, where do you think kind of the boot thing is going to go maybe, or,
Yeah, I think, people talk about how there's kind of some room for improvement and I think when they talk about that, they're mostly focused on the touring side. And so, I think we have pretty good boots out there for resort skiing. But yeah, I think there's, it sounds like Scarpa's working on some things, maybe Crispy too, to get some kind of lighter, better touring boots, because people obviously look at the AT boots now and they're so light and the range of motion on the cuff and all that stuff is there. And so, I think we'll get that at some point here. So yeah, just gotta be patient, I guess.
Yeah. little by little. Yeah. No, I kind of feel the same way. I think there's, even just improving on what we have for, like inbounds application. The touring thing is obviously its own animal. So
yeah,
we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think you nailed it. It's like there's more people in the resort, and I always try to say that in these podcasts and in the shop. It's like, we shouldn't forget telemark's a downhill technique, and it's not always about the up.
Exactly.
It's a lot about the down, but I guess just to finish off, my brother, you got any? I was wondering, are there any funny, weird history facts about Rainey or 22 that no one would know except you?
Probably. I think I just told you a few of them, but yeah, I'm trying to think what else. One exciting piece of news is that we just bought a new building in Driggs.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Is it kind of near where you guys were at before?
Yep. It's even more in town actually. And we've been leasing some space for a little while since we sold the house that we had it out of years ago. But we're finally going to have our own real industrial building and looking forward to getting moved over there and settled in and, more space to make more bindings.
Oh, that's awesome. Congrats, man. Hopefully it's walking distance from the Knotty Pine so you guys can...
It's, definitely walking distance from the Royal Wolf, and it's like a stone's throw from Citizen 33 Brewery. We finally have a brewery in Driggs now.
Oh, so. There you go. You guys are
dangerously close.
You guys are coming up. I know. I need to. Every time I drive through Driggs, it's literally driving through or to stop to say hi to you guys. So I need to come up there and partake. And I still haven't been to Yost, Mark. So we'll have to go do a little Yoastmark visit while we're up there.
For sure. Come on up. We got plenty of snow right now. So
I love it, man. Well, thanks for coming on. For those of you guys that have checked it out today, appreciate you guys listening. Just so you guys know, I'll put a link to the 22 Design stuff. You can follow them. They've got a great Instagram account and great website. You guys can check that out. How you can support us in the podcast is shop for your telemark gear at freeheellife.com. We've got articles and gear reviews on telemarkskier.com, and drop me an email at podcast@freeheellife.com. Let me know how I'm doing and maybe who else you'd like us to get on the podcast in the future. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Until then, spread telemark always, my friends.